35. Oh, it's going fast.
The tornado now very near Jarrell.
The results of Jarrell's nightmare were total devastation.
Houses have been cleaned down to the slab. There's every indication of an F5.
With the first 3 of the 4 patients that we got, they were extremely critical, and they used a lot of blood in surgery, so it really depleted our blood supply.
It's just a lot of people helping people that need it.
They're gone, and they're gone to a better place.
The best healing is for people to realize there is a God.
It's all gone. It looks like a bomb went off over here.
Everything they had is lost. If a tornado comes, you're not safe anywhere.
"20 years ago, an F5 tornado settled right here over Jarrell. It twisted and turned, churning its way across the central Texas prairie. When it was finally over, people and livestock had been killed. Homes were demolished, and the town lay in ruins. And for one eyewitness, it was unforgettable.
What we thought we were just getting a couple of cool photos ended up being something I'll just never forget. It was about like this. It's a really pretty day. We get into Jarrell, and it looks like it's going to start raining a little bit north, so we just pulled over to the truck stop to get a few things and get the car ready. But when we came out of the truck stop is when I looked off, and it was an itty-bitty tornado. Cute thing. I mean, it was really small. So I ran back down in there, and I got a disposable camera, and we ran back up the embankment. Took a couple of photographs, but then it went away, just disappeared. It got really, really quiet, and then we looked back off to the direction where it was, and you could see the ground just starting to kind of move. The whole sky was starting to kind of really funnel into that, and it just got loud and dark and apocalyptic. We were standing right there. That tree is in one of my photographs, and we were staring off that direction. And it was barreling straight down at us as we hit the access road going north, and the whole time we're going broadside to it as it's kind of coming in. But I remember the car being so loud, we could not hear each other. Our gut was like, there's just nothing you can do but just outrun this thing. I mean, that was just all there was to it. I thought it was just something amazing to see, and then it just came back. And at that point, it was fear. I mean, quite honestly, fear. If you can imagine looking back that way and everything is coming at you is nothing but just a massive wall of tornado.
Now, the Jarrell tornado was different from other storms. It was unpredictable. It broke all the rules, and it was a giant that turned into a killer. But just how did the storm form?
That May day started off warm and humid, typical of May mornings here in Central Texas. You could feel the energy in the atmosphere. Mark Fox is the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service in Fort Worth. I asked him how unusual this setup was that day.
Definitely was not supposed to happen. It was kind of a weird setup, and even 20 years later, it's still a weird setup.
Forecast soundings that day were very unstable, but there wasn't much shear or wind increasing with height. Usually you need high energy and shear for significant tornadoes. There was so much energy that day, it didn't matter.
You had a dry line to the west, and you had some outflow boundaries and a little bit of a gravity wave that was just kind of pushing down to the south.
You have to have a lot of wind usually to get a tornado.
Absolutely. I mean, that's 6 miles per hour way up in the middle part of the atmosphere, so it was really a summer type setup.
The first tornado was near Lorena and moved down toward Moody in McLennan County. Other tornadoes skipped across Bell County near Belton and Temple as the storm moved in a strange direction to the southwest. By 3:30 in the afternoon, the first tornado warning was issued for Williamson County. Jarrell sits in the northern part of the county, so it was the first to see the full fury of the storm.
It hit Jarrell about 45 minutes after the hour, so it wasn't moving very fast, and that was one of the reasons that the damage was so intensive. It's just like a heavyweight fighter just hitting the same area over and over and over, and after about 20 punches from Muhammad Ali, somebody's going to feel it, and Jarrell was definitely one of those storms.
The names of the 14 children, 9 women, and 4 men who died in the 1997 tornado are etched in this monument. It's a constant reminder of the lives lost and of Mother Nature's fury.
It wasn't long, that we could see. It had turned back to the east, and it was settling in at the Jarrell area, and we knew it was Jarrell, and our hearts just sank because we knew, all the destruction. We could see it was happening, and we knew people were losing their lives.
In all, 27 people lost their lives when the monstrous F5 tornado struck Jarrell head-on.
If a tornado comes, you're not safe anywhere.
And, we were just helpless. There was nothing we could do.
Looks like a bomb went off over here. It's terrible.
When hearing about the aftermath, there's no wondering why.
There's whole families down there that are gone.
The Igo family, Larry, Joan, Audrey, John, and Paul, didn't survive the storm. Their home was in the direct path of the tornado. During the hours following the tornado, waiting for word about their loved ones was more than some families, including Larry Igo's mother, could endure.
I'm just trying not to think about it.
When news of their deaths came, family, friends, and church members cried over the loss.
Church is really going to miss them. It was so important in this little church. They're gone, and they're gone to a better place.
As word of the disaster and death tolls spread, condolences from around Texas and beyond were sent to the small town.
But each and every one of you are in my prayers.
We reach out in love and prayer to each of you touched by this disaster.
Mourning with his fellow Texans was then Texas Governor George W. Bush.
While we can provide material goods, the best healing is for people to realize there is a God.
The state of Texas has a governor who has a heart. We know where they are. We know where they are. Yes, there are going to be tears, and there are going to be memories that cause us to cry. It's part of the healing process, because the Lord says that weeping may last for a nighttime, but joy comes in the morning.
It's been 2 decades since the tornado, and now the Jarrell Memorial Park stands in honor of the 27 people who died. A plaque hangs and a playscape dedicated in memory of the Igo family. Larry's sisters said they did everything together. They went everywhere together, and this way, they went to heaven together.
Near the park is Double Creek Drive. 20 years ago, this was ground zero. And down that street is where the Hernandez family miraculously survived inside a storm shelter.
When I show up down there, they had the roadblock off.
Gabriel Hernandez didn't know what happened, but
I knew something real bad.
As he got closer, he saw the destruction and the devastation and knew calling it bad was clearly an understatement.
Before, you can see all the houses.
As he stood gazing across the horizon, the realization struck.
You can see all the way to the other end.
With fear and dread weighing on him, he prayed for a miracle, took off through the scattered debris, and went searching for his beloved family. Despite the massive amount of damage, he had hopes of finding them alive, because beneath his home was a storm shelter, and that's exactly where his wife, Maria Isabel, their children, and another family huddled together. As the tornado howled overhead, they prayed.
When she saw the tornado coming real close, about 2 miles away from here, she was real scared.
That's when she grabbed her children and everyone rushed to the emergency shelter. And for about 45 minutes, everyone inside the dark, poorly ventilated, and hot shelter rode out the storm together. Stuck underground, they waited. Then, before Gabriel arrived,
2 guys that they knew about this shelter here, and for some reason God put them together, and they was here just in time to help my wife out.
Finally above ground, nothing prepared her for what she saw when she climbed out.
She was surprised real bad because she didn't see nothing around. I mean, all the houses was gone, everything, was gone.
Though they lost everything, Mr. Hernandez's prayers were answered because
I have my family here.
Truly an amazing story. We visited the Hernandez home, and believe it or not, they rebuilt on the same spot. And although Mr. Hernandez declined to interview, we saw that shelter where they hid from the tornado. And a few streets over, Virginia Davidson lives in that house right over there. She's also a storm survivor with an equally amazing story. With the tornado raging overhead, winds whipping around, her house was literally getting torn apart. She remembers running inside, jumping into the bathtub, and that action saved her life.
I remember it. Some parts I don't remember.
The part Virginia Davidson does remember is unforgettable.
First, there was about 5 minutes of furniture and jumping up and down, and washer and dryer jumping up and down, the house shaking, and a lot of rumbling noises for about 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden I felt the bathtub moving. Picked up the house and moved it And all of a sudden I was on the ground and debris was flying through the air, and there was about 5 minutes of debris beating on my body while it was flying through the air.
Despite being pelted with flying objects, Virginia finally got some relief from the storm's wrath.
And then all of a sudden I just gradually felt it letting up, and I was able to get up and walk away.
Though she received a dangerously deep cut on her leg, Virginia survived. She was alive just like Heike Baumann, who lived miles away and had a similar storm story. She also sought shelter inside a bathtub and survived.
I got in the tub and just started praying, and I heard the windows splinter. I heard the wood start to crack. I felt the moorings give way, and I felt it pick the whole house up and dump it over about 20 feet backwards. And the bathroom landed in those trees there.
When asked about her ordeal, Heike says it was just like a roller coaster ride, but without the seatbelts.
Despite being miles apart, Heike and Virginia share similar stories. Quick thinking and a couple of bathtubs saved them both.
Within minutes of the tornado tearing through Jarrell, firefighters found themselves on the front lines of a major disaster. Meanwhile, ER doctors and nurses were preparing for the worst, but no amount of training could prepare them for what they were about to see.
20 years ago, Cliff Turner was 18 years old. He was finishing high school, waiting on graduation day, and was already a Jarrell volunteer firefighter. To this day, he still remembers seeing the tornado for the first time.
And you could see just the thin rope.
That thin, rope-like tornado soon turned into the F5 monster that brought death and destruction to the small, close-knit Jarrell community.
I remember getting the call.
The minute he hangs up the phone, he's out the door heading to the fire station.
So I got in one of the trucks and, down to the scene, and I remember coming down the hill. The main area of population at that time was Double Creeks.
When he arrives on scene, he's stunned.
I mean, there was nothing. There wasn't a board left on it. There was spots in the road where 2 inches of asphalt had been completely removed and it was gravel. I remember just coming up on a bunch of debris and a telephone pole.
What he saw was horrific.
Grass completely sucked out of the ground, just bare dirt. Things were stripped clean. I mean, I've never seen a house where a house used to be that was a concrete slab with just pipes sticking out of the ground.
There was also,
a lot of debris, a lot of mess, just a lot of pieces. Thinking of, what am I gonna do? Adrenaline took over, so I parked the truck, got on the radio and called dispatch and told them, I needed everything I could get. I took off on foot, just looking for anybody, anything.
The searchers are out there, the rescue teams are out searching for victims. They're going through with teams of people where each house was at and turning over everything that needs to be turned over and looking, making sure there's nobody going to be left behind.
But no matter how much rescuers or Scherner searched the disaster zone, nobody was alive.
I worked with one of the JPs, and what we did was we went around scouring the area and looking for what we thought were possible remains. The judge would take pictures, document it, and then we would move on.
Meanwhile, doctors and hospital workers at Scott and White prepared and braced for casualties.
When we found out we had a big tornado hitting populated areas, we're the only level 1 trauma center between, Austin and Dallas. We knew we were going to have casualties because in some cases they had to find people under rubble or, scattered in different places. For the major injuries, it took several hours.
Doctors treated those who were less hurt or considered the walking wounded.
There were some people that didn't get hit by the tornado, but they got other injuries. So we started getting some of those fairly quickly. Had patients that came in that when I walked in the room, it almost looked like they were really hairy, but they weren't. And it was because the tornado blew grass against them at such force that the grass was actually sticking out of their skin. And
eventually, patients with more serious and critical injuries started arriving.
They had a lot of other really bad injuries, a lot of orthopedic sort of injuries. We had traumatic injuries that I've never seen before or since. It's certainly taxed our resources
With the first 3 of the 4 patients that we got, they were extremely critical, and they used a lot of blood in surgery, so that really depleted our blood supply.
With the need for blood critical, Central Texans answered the call.
Had a tremendous response from the communities.
I'm giving blood for the people in Jarrell.
Most of them don't know any people out of here, so it's just a lot of people helping people that need it.
There's nothing, and it's a sight it's going to stick in your mind, back of your mind for a long time.
Something I'll never forget. The folks that are here will never forget.
There are certain patients that you always remember, and 2 of them came from that night.
The injuries back then were not only traumatic, some of them suffered psychologically as well.
With more than 24 of the dead being children, Jarrell's teaching community gathered, not only to mourn the loss of the children, they also lost one of their own, a teacher known for her kindness and loving nature. A few weeks ago, they gathered to sit, visit, and remember those who they lost. At the Jarrell ISD's administration building is a wall with the youthful faces of students and one beloved teacher. Their lives cut short by the fierce tornado that Charlotte Vansel vividly remembers seeing.
It was so mesmerizing. You couldn't stop looking at it. It just kept getting louder and louder and louder. And I could see debris coming through, just all this stuff. But it started out as just a little blue thread, and I thought nothing would happen.
But the unthinkable did happen. A deadly F5 tornado developed.
Then it was just like black everywhere.
The events of that day still affect these educators. They gathered to reminisce about the tragedy that claimed the lives of 14 students and Jackie Puska's dear friend.
Joan Igo taught across the hallway from me. Joan was very positive, very caring person, always had a smile on her face, always. I would see her 3 kids leave her classroom in the morning to head over into the high school portion of the building. I actually saw them when they were all together before I left. They were heading to pick up her husband so that they could be together because they knew that the weather was going to be bad.
One of the toughest things Coach Drew Sumner remembers is learning about all of the deaths.
It wasn't like that one moment I learned everybody that had died. You learn it in parts. You learn that these kids died, and you learned about the Igo family, and then you learn about this story, and it just kept piling on.
And if that wasn't tough enough, the hardest part was yet to come.
We went to 13 funerals one day.
Even decades later, they still find comfort in remembering those innocent and youthful smiles that brought them so much joy.
The intensity of the Jarrell tornado has been among the fiercest and most devastating weather events in Texas history, and the damage and destruction was massive. And while those who survived will never forget, they're determined to honor the memories of those lost during that day.